Pilots in Egypt are in the hospital. This is the
Hey now.
first Israeli jet hit by enemy fire in decades.
KFI Winter Olympics coverage.
Oh my God.
Spoiler warning.
A spoiler alert is so annoying.
Medal of the Olympic Games in Pyeongchang in South
My battery's low, so we'll have to.
He's only 17 years old. He is from Silver, Colorado. He scored
I will have to be niggardly with the battery.
Struggled on his first two runs, but made the last one count to secure the first goal.
Got to wear my F-bomb hat.
First medal overall. Traffic from your helpful
I'll make I'll make it easy for everybody.
On the 10.
That's going to be on the 10 East at Via Verde. That crash is blocking the right lane. Traffic flows all the way back to Holt Avenue. And still some slowing in Hollywood. 101 southbound side is slow from Normandy Avenue.
So I've lost Neil Saavedra noticed this yesterday. I've lost 15 pounds in 1 month. I have a charger. I'm on. So to help me prepare for Dark Secret Place TV, I'm losing weight. So yeah, so all you old guys, here's the deal. I have a secret about that. I mean, there is a quick way to get your body right, and I don't know if I have the license to print money on that one, but maybe I will. I'll start doing a video diary or something on it. But even my daughter noticed it because I'm teaching. I kick the soccer ball with my daughter for like 1 hour a night, and she noticed that I'm a little lighter on my feet. No, that's the thing. Here's the discipline. It's you can deal with your alcoholism later on. You just have to. All right, all good. You have to just switch to vodka. You need to drop beer, except for like Michelob Ultra, like 1 Michelob Ultra per day or whatever, or 1 Asahi. But but you got to go to switch to something no carbs like vodka or gin, and then use diet tonic water, and then deal with your alcoholism later on.
We lead local from KFI's 24-hour newsroom. I'm Michael Supre.
Dark Secret Place.
This radioactivity is coming from
Brian Suits on KFI.
I would bomb the shit out of them.
Dark Secret Place with Brian Suits on KFI.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here live until midnight with Los Angeles' #1 show. No commercial dance party. No heavy beats or any new rock. Nothing like that. They're not happy with me upstairs where they're playing the music, but down here on the 4th floor. And I used to run K-Rock Night at the Palace. We were #1 commercial-free K-Rock dance party. But now in Los Angeles, there's a guy in a dark room with no producer, #1 show in LA. I mean, dig if you will that picture. Things that we'll get to tonight. What happened in Israel about 24 hours ago that left Prime Minister Netanyahu saying this.
I've been warning for some time about the dangers of Iran's military entrenchment.
Yeah, we'll certainly get into that. But and then a little later on, probably next hour, with 24 hours of Olympics now under my belt, watching some of the gushing over the younger sister of Kim Jong-il is making me Kim Jong sick. It's regardless of the fact that, okay, all right, regardless of, that she's the younger sister of a guy, a third-generation crime family running a gigantic penal colony. Okay, is she easy on the eyes? I don't know. Maybe if you're some weirdo completely into female K-pop groups, maybe you might think that she might be what you might call attractive. All I see is the younger sister of a despot, who is the granddaughter of a despot, the granddaughter of Kim Il Sung, who invented the system, the modern system that is now North Korea. And to treat her as anything other than Hitler's sister is just really bizarre. Well, that's what's going on. And NBC last night during the opening ceremonies, as the joint the South Korean, North Korean team entered with no South Korean flags, no North Korean flags. Mike Tirico was doing he was running the opening ceremonies, and they had like an interior designer, somebody as the color guy, and then Katie Couric. And so I'm waiting as the joint North-South team comes in. Are they going to say something to the American domestic TV consumer and acknowledge at least that this police state that literally relies on starvation and murder as an economic policy has decided to invite itself to this Winter Olympics? And South Korea, desperate to avoid conflict, desperate for some kind of progress for the first time since 1953, allowed North Korea to usurp themselves onto one of their Olympic teams, completely sweeping aside the concerns of the athletes who had spent their lives to make the South Korean female hockey team. And their government said, screw that. You're going to just absorb these North Koreans. We have no idea what skills they have, but they're going to be part of our team. So that happened. And all Katie Couric can say, as the camera is showing the joint team, this is 90% South Koreans and then like 15 North Koreans. All Katie Couric can say is, of course, there are some concerns and some questions about human rights. ... She didn't even say in North Korea. I mean, you would have thought that she's talking about some magical, mystical country made up out of whole cloth, because they were waving this flag, a big white field with a blue Korean peninsula superimposed in the middle of the white flag. It was no country known to man. But she made it out as if those people were showing right now, there's some questions about the human rights records. No. There's no questions about South Korea's human rights record. South Korea had a very rough period, as many new countries do, born of war. North Korea continues to this day to, and by the way, there are no questions about human rights in North Korea. There's none. There's absolutely none. What are your questions? If someone's convicted of subversion, are their parents and their children locked into the political prison with them? Yes, the answer is yes. So more on that next hour. It was head scratching. I had to rewind it several times just to make sure I heard her correctly. And I heard her correctly. She said, there are questions about human rights. Wow, brave stance, Katie. So anywho, well, the United States on the ground in Syria, again to reset the table, the U.S. has approximately 8,000 troops on the ground in Syria. We have full-on FOBs. We have full-on forward operating bases. We have a helicopter base in Syria. This is all east of the Euphrates, which approximately bifurcates, cuts Syria in half, north-south. The Euphrates originates in Turkey, and then it cuts sort of from northwest to southeast on its way into Iraq, and it divides Syria into a rough east and west. And on the banks of the Euphrates to and east are the American trained, supplied, equipped, and led Syrian Defense Forces and the Syrian Kurds, the YPG. Near the city of Deir ez-Zor in the southern part of Syria. On Wednesday, for some reason, regime forces, Bashar Assad's forces, decided that attacking the American-supported and organized SDF, the Syrian Defense Forces, at one of their major headquarters would be a good idea. Now, keep in mind that these kind of things have been deconflicted. There's an office in Baghdad with American military personnel talking to Russian military personnel, saying things like, hey, we have a major headquarters east of the Euphrates. These are the exact grid, latitude and longitude on this. That is us. Americans are there. That is not a target. Do not hit that. Yet they hit it. And so the U.S.-led force, including the guys on the ground, struck back. How many Russians did we kill? Are you even hearing this? Have you heard this week? That on Thursday, when we retaliated, hours after this attack, that wounded several and only killed one guy, no Americans that we're hearing about were hit in this attack, but they were present. We retaliated against the forces that did this, and according to Russian sources, more than 200 Russians were killed. We killed, with artillery and American aircraft, approximately 215 Russians on Thursday. Why aren't you hearing about this? I'll tell you when we come back, right after this. There's several conflicts happening in Syria all at once. I mean, literally, that's one of them. We'll get to Israel versus Syria, and then we'll get to Turkey versus Syria, all in this hour. It is a Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here because the world's always melting down, so why not melt down on LA's #1 show? KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. Michael Chapé with the news.
A guy on probation's been arrested for trying to get work downtown Riverside. Police say the man walked up to the front desk.
That is true. #1, 25 to 54, #1, 35 to 64, 10 to midnight.
Didn't get any cash. Police in Ohio say 2 officers
I'm beating the shit out of Power 106.
from the suburb. The shooter was apparently injured and is in custody. The officers were shot while responding to a domestic situation. The mayor of Spartansburg, Pennsylvania, is standing by its volunteer fire company's re-election of its fire chief, a registered sex offender. The guy, sir.
I have a new bumper too. Chicks are really good. We found out that if you have fertilized eggs and you put them in an incubator, that if you get a 50% birth rate, you're doing pretty good. And what we got out of 12 eggs. One of them early on wasn't viable, so we had 11 eggs. And out of 11 eggs, we got 7 chicks. So we're pretty happy. And you know what the magic trick that we employed was? We let a hen sit on the eggs for 21 days. Wow, right? So yeah, we got a more than 50% rate on that. So we're pretty happy. All right, let me get my bumper ready.
Ma ce n'è una, se che prendono il sol, ma ce n'è una che prende la luna. Tintarella di luna, tintarella d'urla, tintarella di luna.
All right, we're good. Tintarella di Luna from Mina, 1959. You'll love this song. I love the obscure European go-go hipster stuff from the late 50s, early 60s. Because this is like, I've never heard it before. It was recorded long before I was born. Yeah, and then CNN, or no, NBC Olympics had this thing about, oh, we're just mesmerized by the North Korean cheerleaders. You know, they sent a cheerleading contingent. You know, and I mean, these are robots. They are political prisoners. It's just bizarre.
So what are you waiting for? Take control and find out what it's like
But keep in mind, and I'll talk about this next hour, that Kim's sister, Kim Yo-jun, you know, she's never missed a meal. You know, she's you know, she's a Brahmin. She's a sister of Pharaoh.
They are your next-door neighbors and your colleagues in schools, offices, and factories. Be a guard soldiers to stand ready to serve at all times for family, for community, and for country. To learn more, log on to NationalGuard.com or contact an Army National Guard recruiter in your area. Sponsored by the California Army National Guard, aired by the California Broadcasters Association at this station.
Gatto Air Conditioning is contractor license 1023790. Have you ever tried to blow up an air mattress through one of those little mouth tubes about the same diameter as a soda straw? You blow and blow until you get lightheaded and dizzy, but the air mattress is still saggy and soft and nowhere near usable. This is Ken Goodrich of Gatto Air Conditioning. That's how your air conditioner feels when it's trying to force air through ductwork that wasn't designed and installed correctly. If you have high energy bills, it's probably not your air conditioner. It's probably your ductwork.
Yeah, he would. Of course, he would kill her if she wasn't useful to him. But she is a blood relative. So keep that in mind. Did anyone see Justin Trudeau in town with Eric Garcetti? I mean, it was like a date. It was like you know, it was like two betas. It was amazing. Those two, it was like a douche singularity. It was astounding. Garcetti and Justin Trudeau walking around the hiking trails around Griffith Park. Oh my God, I've never seen such. Oh, it was crazy. And Garcetti loves Justin Trudeau. He thinks that's a world leader right there. And I'll talk about this next hour because it kills me to say this, but I mean, Garcetti said that, oh, Canada's a defense partner. Canada's not a partner. They are what we say they are. We treat them like a partner. But have you ever heard of a partner who contributes less than 1% to the business? And does that really over objections, yet that partner will sit there and talk about what great decisions they have. Canada has free health care only because they don't need to pay for aircraft carriers. So we do have the world's longest, and I'm queued up. And I'm queued up.
Tintarella di luna, tintarella tu non latte, tutta notte stai sul letto, sopra il tetto come i gatti, e se c'è la luna
KFI AM 640. It is a Dark Secret Place. Brian sits in here until midnight, and yeah, we'll get another thing happened today. Like I said, Mayor Garcetti and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau of Canada took a long romantic walk on a hiking trail near Griffith Park, and then they talked about how wonderful each other are and how they're soul brothers and the whole thing. So we'll talk about that next hour, because Garcetti had the balls, had the gall, I should say, to say that Canada was a defense partner, and I don't know what his definition of partnership is, but they're definitely not that. So anyway, according to Russian social media, the Russian equivalent, the Russian ripoff of Facebook, is called Vkontakte, VK, which means for contact, or for contact. And the founder, because he wouldn't sell out to Putin, he had to flee the country. So I think he's here in the U.S. somewhere. But anyway, in Russian Facebook and Russian VK, several independent and normally reliable sources were even rebroadcasting intercepted phone calls. Because somebody on the ground in Syria is intercepting personal cell phone calls. And Russian citizens known to be in Syria were calling each other and calling back to Moscow, talking about an entire company of Russian troops killed, which is approximately 200. But the major Russian mercenary company called Wagner Group that provides private military contractors to the Russian command in Syria, they're acknowledging only 25 dead. But this is what the United States, after our headquarters were east of the Euphrates, were attacked, and again, apparently no Americans were wounded or killed. Our retaliation included a ground assault by the Syrian Defense Forces, the SDF, the Arab guys that we back, Marine artillery, U.S. Marine Corps artillery. There's at least 2 batteries of 155 millimeter towed howitzers on the ground in Deir ez-Zor. So apparently 2 batteries were unleashing several hundred rounds of HE onto this position that Russians were occupying. And then came in the fixed wing dropping bombs and then the helicopters. So when the dust settled after several hours of this, 215 Russians are dead. Why aren't we hearing something out of Moscow? Well, because what Putin is doing in Syria is perfecting his hybrid warfare, as they call it, that he began using in Ukraine. You take Crimea, but there's no one's wearing a Russian flag. You've got little green men. You got men wearing green uniforms, speaking Russian. The day before, they were wearing the Russian Marine Corps uniform, called Russian Naval Infantry. But they put on different uniforms, left their base, and seized a couple airfields, flew in more guys that look like them, and then before you know it, Crimea is now declaring allegiance to Russia. Then thing 2, the eastern part of Ukraine, a so-called militia pops up from nowhere, not wearing insignia, and you've got old guys, old gray-haired guys, drunk, claiming to be a colonel or a major. Then you've got a lot of very, very young guys following a chain of command with tight military haircuts who are operating complex equipment. But there's deniability. No one's saying that they're from Russia. They're saying, oh, yeah, I'm a local Ukrainian of Russian descent, though my accent is Muscovite. And the expressions I use and the slang I use is that of a street kid from Moscow. But no, really, I'm a country guy from East Ukraine. So it's worked for Putin very well, brilliantly in Ukraine. He maintains his fiction that that's just it's an uprising of ethnic Russians. I got nothing to do with it. Meanwhile, in Syria, Putin remembers how Yeltsin effed up Chechnya. Yeltsin effed up Chechnya by sending Russian army soldiers in there to get slaughtered. And they got slaughtered. And when their bodies came back to Moscow, the families were outraged. They were upset. He effed it up badly. When Putin took over on New Year's of 2000, because Yeltsin wanted to spend more time with his family, he did it right. He first of all, he kicked the media out, and then he sent Russian soldiers with deniability. So now what he's doing in Syria is, yes, there's a base. There's a very large base near the Mediterranean coast, near the city of Tartus in Syria. There's a base called Hamim. It is filled with frontline Russian Air Force fighter bombers, air superiority aircraft, close air support, helicopters, whole thing. And yes, there are regular Russian troops. And yes, those guys go out in the field every once in a while. But then who are out there in Syria on the ground? Who are these Russians out there speaking Russian, being caught on camera, and fighting the so-called rebels and supporting the Assad regime? Well, they look like Russians. They carry their weapons like Russians. They're carrying Russian weapons, in fact, and they're wearing old bits of Russian kit and equipment and uniform, but they're not actually active-duty Russian soldiers. They're guys who are recruited at the Kremlin's direction to fight for a private company in Syria. And they have been the muscle. They've been doing the heavy lifting for Moscow for the past 3 years. Why? Well, because Putin can deny that they're his. When they die, no one knows. The media doesn't report it in Moscow. The army doesn't have to go to the airport and offload coffins with full honors because it's some private contractor. Some kid who got out of the army a couple of years ago. He's 25, 26. Can't get a job in Russia. He's promised $1,000 a month, U.S. dollars, if he goes to Syria and do what he used to do in the army. And so when they die in Syria, more often than not, according to the ones who've survived and come home, their buddies who were killed as private contractors in Syria are buried in Syria. And their parents or wives or whatever are given only minimal details. Your loved one was killed in Syria and laid to rest with his comrades or whatever. So that's why we killed, according to their sources, to their numbers, over 200 Russian citizens on Thursday, but the Russians aren't going ape poop over it. Meanwhile, Israel last night, a huge airstrike in the Damascus area. Why'd they do that? And why did the Russians allow them to do that? Could they have done anything? Yeah, it gets more complex. So we'll move on to the second war going on in Syria. And then at the end of this hour, we'll talk about Turkey facing mounting losses in the third war going on in Syria. One country, three wars. We'll be back right after this. Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until midnight. KFI, AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news.
Some robbers have pulled off a heist in Santa Barbara that sounds awfully familiar.
Okay. Commercial-free dance party. I've been in a suit and tie on Kennedy now for a year. I promised her a year ago that I would do suit and tie. And her producers and everyone say, yes, suit and tie. If you do a suit and tie, you'll be a regular. So I do that. Because ultimately, it's good for me, right? Because she always identifies me as KFI talk show host. Yep, I'm already plugged in, see. But yeah, that's the thing. I don't have to wear pants. That's the good part. Yeah, the podcast at connectpal.com, Dark Secret Place. That's the podcast. Yeah, so I need to morph that into this TV part into a live show either. And you know what, it's funny because I was talking about, do I do a morning show or an afternoon show? Well, here's the thing. Since it would be Dark Secret Place TV, why not do both? Why not do 9 to 10 a.m. or 8 to 9 a.m. and then come back and do 4 to 5 p.m.? Because if you're driving to work or driving home, you can at least stream the audio, right? So would you do that? If I did that live, if I did an hour of like Brian on the news, there's no restriction on me doing morning and afternoon, right? So why not do that? I mean, that's what's funny about sort of the media environment that we're in now. Is why not do that? If more is better, then why the hell not do that? So that there's nothing stopping me from going online, seeing the news at 6 a.m. or 5 a.m. and getting, giving you the best first take, on the news. Something that when I used to do a morning show at KABC and at KVI in Seattle, I love doing mornings because if you're any good at it, then you get the first take on the news. And if you're any good at it, it's the best take people hear all day long. So that hours later, when some other show comes on, and they do that topic that you did at 7 a.m., and they make it sound like they're reading the story for the first time, you're always going to say, yeah, you know what? I heard Suits talk about that at 8 a.m., and he had the best take.
Overnight lows, 40s, 50s to near 60, and then tomorrow should be mostly sunny for the inland areas at least. Clouds are going to be sticking around the beaches. It looks like tomorrow highs near the coast getting up to near 70. Sunny inland with highs in the low to upper 70s. And it's going to be on the breezy side. You could see gusts up to 45 miles an hour. Red flag fire warning in effect tomorrow night. And then for Monday, cloudy. And chance of showers starts at about 20%, goes up to 40% for Monday night.
You know what's crazy? You want to hear what's crazy? Here's what's crazy. Is that there are some times when I go just driving around, just thinking and all that, and I wind up in Tehachapi. And first time I went through Tehachapi, I thought, oh my God, what a little dump. What an afterthought of a town. But I actually stayed in Tehachapi, drove through Tehachapi. And when you drive through Tehachapi, like you think you're heading to Grapevine, if there was a straight road from Tehachapi to Grapevine, it would have to go through this gigantic bowl of a valley. And so you're in this valley, and there's no way out. There's one highway in, I want to say it's 202 or something like that. There's a California State Penitentiary in there. There is a amazingly high-end summer camp there for LA kids, gymnastics, all this crap. And then there's a private housing development called Bear Valley Springs, right? So I thought, well, I'll take a tear through Bear Valley Springs because it's up at 6,000 feet, you know, 6,000 and 7,000 feet. And I thought, wow, that would be cool. You know, an hour and a half drive to LA and I get snow. You know, wouldn't this be cool? So I pull up to the gate of Bear Valley Springs, and it is a gated community, and they have a private police department. They have their own police department there. Ford F-250, you know, or whatever they are, Ford Raptor police cars, the pickup trucks. And amazing. I'm in love with Tehachapi. Here's the bottom line. I'm in love with fucking Tehachapi. I just don't know why you can't get to Bakersfield or Grapevine from there straight. All right, I'm queued up.
KFI AM 640.
Or stimulating talk.
An iHeart radio station.
KFI AM 640, more stimulating talk. It is the Dark Seeker Place. Brian sits in here until midnight. Next hour, we'll get to the media love affair with Kim Jong-un's little sister, Kim Yo-jong, who's, I guess, still in South Korea. But last night, a sort of a snippy little conflict between Israel and Syria got red hot. And the Israelis have been striking targets of opportunity in Syria, such as whenever Hezbollah has like a wedding or a convention or something, generally the Israelis will hit it. Or there is a pretty amazing coincidence where high-value cargo will be flown in from Tehran to Damascus, sometimes with high-ranking Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps people who are managing the ground war in Syria for Bashar al-Assad. And the amazing coincidence is they'll land and they'll get in a convoy of SUVs, and then that convoy gets hit. It's just amazing luck that the Israelis have. Or they have some insiders somewhere, and maybe by now the Iranians have fingered that out. So here is what happened yesterday. For some reason, unbeknownst to anyone, a Iranian UAV crossed into Israeli airspace, took off from a military airfield south of Damascus called T4, and was flown actively by a pilot sending radio messages to the UAV, and it flew into Israel. Now, the Israelis saw it coming. The Israelis know all about their own airspace. They have assets in the air and on the ground. You're not going to get the drop on Israel. Israeli Air Force Apache helicopter shot down the UAV, and the Israelis released the infrared video of that. And in retaliation for the violation of Israeli airspace, the Israelis very quickly, as they can do, because they know where their targets are, they very quickly briefed up approximately 20 aircraft, got them in the air with targets, entered Syrian airspace unopposed, and began interdicting these targets on the ground, including the control van of the UAV. So they're hitting everything. And somebody, either a Syrian army missile crew, or according to Hezbollah, with their own missile crew, fired a salvo of missiles as the Israelis were done hitting their targets. I mean, the strike is over. And the last guys out, in a strike package like that, the last guys out are the electronic warfare guys. Because they're the ones who turn on the switch and blind enemy radar. And then, obviously, when all's done, they're the last ones out. Well, so according to Israel Defense Force sources, an F-16, a two-seat F-16, Israeli F-16, called an F-16I, was hit by a missile fired from the ground in Syria, and that the shrapnel from the missile damaged the aircraft in such a way that it was not going to be able to make it back to its base. It was losing fuel, and it was losing the ability to fly like an airplane. The pilots, of course, know don't punch out over Syria in 2018. If maybe you land in the hands of ISIS, maybe you land in the hands of the Free Syrian Army, whatever. You know, look what happened to that Russian pilot last week. The guy sat there on the ground, fought it out, and croaked. So the Israelis now get back to Israeli airspace. So they make Israeli airspace and put the aircraft in a path where it's going to hit a uninhabited area, which, if you've ever been to Israel or you know anyone who's been to Israel, you know that's kind of hard. It's a fairly densely populated country, but in the north, there are open spaces. I mean, it's got an agricultural economy. So they put this F-16 into a path, and they ejected at a fairly low altitude, apparently like 5,000 feet. The two pilots hit the ground alive, but it was very windy, and they were evidently injured in the landing. They were not injured because of the SAM missile or anything like that. They were injured in the landing, but they're both alive. And Hezbollah declared it a strategic victory. And I think they're going to have to look up the word strategic, because one F-16 isn't strategic. But for the Israelis, it's a bit of an institutional shock, because they have not lost an aircraft to enemy fire since 1982, since the Bekaa Valley 1982 war with Syria and Israel. So they're shocked, but the two guys are alive. And for the Israeli part, they're saying that they did significant damage to the Syrian air defense forces and the whole thing. Prime Minister Netanyahu said this on a TV address earlier today.
I've been warning for some time about the dangers of Iran's military offensive. Iran seeks to use the Syrian territory to attack Israel for its professed goal of destroying it. This morning, Iran brazenly violated Israel's sovereignty. They dispatched an Iranian drone from Syrian territory into Israel, and this demonstrates that our warnings were 100% correct. Israel holds Iran and its Syrian hosts responsible for today's aggression. We will continue to do whatever is necessary to protect our sovereignty and our security.
So take him seriously, by the way. Now here's the punchline, and here's something that you're not hearing in the American media. Vladimir Putin possesses on the ground in Syria the means to prevent the Israelis from doing what they did today, or doing what they've been doing for the past 2 years, and taking out these targets of opportunity. Hezbollah leaders, Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps leaders, etc. He possesses the means to do that in the form of the S-400 missile system, the world's most capable missile system. Now, orders include Turkey, our NATO ally, Saudi Arabia, our ally. Everyone agrees it's the state-of-the-art air defense system. Putin could deny this airspace to Israel. Why doesn't he? Isn't he Assad's friend? Isn't he Iran's friend? Well, he could move one battery of those missiles, 2 launchers with a total of 8 missiles that are reloadable, to Damascus. And the mere threat of that system there in Damascus would probably deter the Israelis from ever entering Syrian airspace for the near future. So why doesn't he do that? Well, because we're seeing the limits of his alliance with Assad and with Tehran. His alliance with Assad is, I will make sure you stay in power, but I won't do your dirty work. I will do whatever it takes to help you stay in power, but you need to do the dirty work and the heavy lifting. And then I'm not here to defend Iran. If Iran wants to use Syria as a springboard to attack Israel, that's on them. I'm not going to get their back. I am here just to guarantee that Assad stays in power. Now, Netanyahu went to Moscow months ago, and he said to Vladimir Putin, I am not trying to topple Assad. And Putin said, good. I'm trying to keep him in power. So we are not enemies on this. And everything else below that is short strokes. So if Israel wants to blow up Hezbollah in Syria, they have a green light. And by the way, here's a wacky coincidence. The Russians have several squadrons of highly capable air defense fighters in Syria. They were not in the air last night, nor would they be in the air. If the Israelis are doing a strike like this, the Russians are on the ground or they're way to the north, monitoring the Turks. So it's laid bare. It's really obvious what's going on. Putin is in it to keep Assad in power. He's not in it to defend Syrian airspace. If Syria wants to get their air force up in the air, they're just going to lose planes. They're going to make holes in the ground. And Assad knows this. And if he's sitting there wondering, why doesn't my big brother get his mighty air force in the air and wipe these Jews out of the sky? Well, because that's not the deal. That was never the deal between Putin and Assad. And speaking of Turkey and their war, we'll move on to the third war going on in Syria right after this. It is the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here until midnight. KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk. Michael Chappé with the news. So anywho. Yeah, so Tehachapi's kind of a funny little town. Kind of a cool little town. Yes, Chain of Command is terrific. I highly recommend it. You should binge watch it. It's really, really good. Terrific place. Yeah, and Stallion Springs is that place at the west end of that bowl that I'm talking about. Here, I'll use MapQuest. We probably could jam the S-400, but I bet you we're not going to be very effective with it. I do not underestimate the Russians and their ability to succeed at electronic warfare and air defense. They are very, 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 very good. Very, very, very good. They know what the fuck they're doing. We went at them measure for countermeasure for 15 years in Vietnam. We got the better of them ultimately, but the Russians learned just like we learned. Let me do the terrain. I guess so. So let's say, well, I can't do that. Yeah, so here's Tehachapi. And then there's this, you keep driving on 202. And there is Bear Valley Springs. It's really, really weird. Really quirky little place. Apparently there's a lot of retired Major League Baseball types in there. There's a huge golf course. But I just thought it was cool because it's like at really high altitude and all that. Though, I think like everyone, like if I won the lottery, I'd probably move back to the Seattle area in a tax-free state. But I like high altitudes. I like snow, especially watching biathlon and cross-country skiing. I realize how much I miss it. Just absolutely love doing it. Notionally, the equivalent to the S-400 is the American theater high-altitude air defense. The difference is, though, We don't have many of those. The Russians use their S-400 system way down on a lower level. They're mass producing them. They use them way down on the brigade level. And we would have a THAAD system sitting in Saudi Arabia, or like we do in South Korea. The Russians would have 20 THAADs. So yeah, they are very good. And I learned from living with those fuckers for 6 months in Bosnia. You underestimate them at your own peril. They're not stupid. Maybe their system, maybe their army can be stupid or whatever, but they are technologically a significant foe, and it's, that's the thing, is it's the only modern part of their economy. It's the only successful part of their economy is the military export part. So the rest of the economy is a complete basket case. If they if they diversified their economy, they would be pretty formidable, And remember, the first handheld video game, Tetris. Remember Tetris? Tetris is still a fun game. Tetris was written, under the Soviet Union. In 1986, 85 or 86, the guy who wrote Tetris had to get permission to negotiate with an American software company. Some Russian wrote Tetris, and Tetris kicked the shit out of any handheld game that anyone else had made for the Nintendo Game Boy. Because I remember I had a first generation Game Boy in the Gulf War, and that was all I played was Tetris. My God, it's such an addictive game. So yeah, there's a significant intellectual reservoir in Russia. There always has been, for hundreds of years. Some of the world's best literature and poetry and all that. But they've had to, deal with a repressive, monarchy, and then communism, and now Putin. How much time? Okay. 100%
free consultation. 800-606-6000. Or visit getldi.com.
All right, we're going to do Al Wilson, the snake. But that's the contradiction with Russians, is that at the end of the day, they are just, crazy risk-taking sons of bitches. And you talk about corner cutting. Corner cutting is a national virtue in Russia. And, we're living here in the United States, and there's two kinds of cultures on Earth. There's zero defect, and there's good enough. And we are living in a zero, no matter what you think, we are living in a zero defect culture. We don't tolerate defects at, San Onofre or whatever. Russia thinks it's a zero defect culture. It actually is a good enough culture. All right, Al Wilson, the snake. Here's our bumper.
Hi, this is Mick Jones of Foreigner on iHeartRadio.
And iHeartRadio is all your favorite stations. Thousands of the best radio stations from across the country. Plus, iHeartRadio is free. Download the app today. All your favorite music, all your favorite stations, all free.
With Valentine's Day right around the corner, it's hard not to be thinking about love and romance. I assure you, love and romance are two great
I'm going to run out of power again, I believe. We say iShart Radio.
Tomorrow morning at 6 on KFI AM 640.
More stimulating talk.
On her way to work one morning, down the path alongside the lake, a tender-hearted
KFI AM 640. It is the Dark Seeker Place. Brian Suits in here until midnight. Next hour, the media love affair with Kim Yo Jong, the younger sister of Kim Jong Un, who, as it turns out, is the head of a police state called North Korea. And so people ask me, what the hell is that groovy early 70s sounding song? Is that Tom Jones? No, that's Al Wilson, and it's the song is The Snake. And that might be a metaphor. So now we're in our tour of Syria. Let's get to the third conflict going on in Syria. If you're wondering what happened to ISIS again, then you're going to want to binge listen to the last year's worth of Dark Secret Place, because ISIS is so 2016. They spent 2017 trying to escape Syria. And just to review on this, is again a very underreported story here in the West. And so when Vice or someone a year from now does some expose because they found a mass grave, don't be surprised, because EU nations in direct communications with Baghdad, Belgium, France, Germany, Italy, in direct communications with Prime Minister Abadi in Baghdad, said, if you come across any of our citizens fighting for ISIS, we don't want to hear about it. And if you want to resolve it any way you want to resolve it, feel free. You will have a lifetime pass at Euro Disney. They don't want those guys back. Same as in Syria. The marching orders for the YPG, the Syrian Defense Forces, who, this is where it gets complex, were nominally in charge of, they were doing the same thing. As ISIS attempted to surrender, if they were Europeans, they were killed. If they were ISIS, they were killed. So, and they negotiated local ceasefires. We consider that targeting. We said, okay, fine. What color is your convoy? And where approximately will you be in about an hour and a half? And we slaughtered those sons of bitches because they deserve it, right? I don't want to clean up that mess, and I don't want them coming back to frickin' Tehachapi. And the Belgians didn't want them coming back to Tehachapi, Belgium. So don't worry about ISIS, they're gone. But along comes this third conflict. Turkey, coming up on 4 weeks ago, invaded the bordering province of Afrin, Syria, from their far western province. Along the Mediterranean coastline, you have Turkey there, and then you have about 80 miles of Syria. And Syria inland has a mountainous, hilly, not mountainous, but a rolling, hilly province called Afrin, including a city called Afrin. And the Turks are executing the will of the president, President Erdogan, to create a 30-mile deep Kurd-free zone from the Mediterranean to Iraq. So they invaded 4 weeks ago with the cream of their regular army. Remember, they invaded the middle of Syria about a year and a half ago, and they have since held their positions, pulled some guys out. So they invaded with the cream of their army, and they're getting their asses handed to them. The Turks paid a lot of money for these state-of-the-art German tanks, the Leopard 2A5, an excellent tank. Same gun as the American M1A1 Abrams, and why shouldn't it be? It's a German gun. But it's not a turbine, it's a regular diesel. It's a good, really good tank. Most of NATO, except for Britain, France, and the U.S., operate German Leopard tanks. Frickin' Canada has Leopard tanks. Everyone loves the Leopard, and it's a tank that keeps getting better every year. The Germans make it better and better and better because that's what they do, right? Well, Kurds with $10,000 anti-tank missiles from 2,000 meters away, from 2 kilometers away, have taken out at least 22 of the top-of-the-line tanks in the Turkish army. And every time they take out a tank, evidently the crew is fully in there. So they're losing 5 guys at a pop. And what was supposed to be sort of a walkover, because after all, Turkish infantry aren't there, they're using jihadists. They're using ISIS rejects and other guys. Well, these guys aren't exactly, their stomach's not exactly in the same fight as Turkey would like them to be. And so this second Turkish invasion in Syria is not turning out to be exactly what they thought it would be. And it very well may be, because now the Turks are doing what they're calling an operational pause, and they're barely 20 miles inside this province, and they're losing men to a force of light infantry people basically carrying their ammo. They don't have vehicles. They don't have tracked vehicles or tanks to go toe-to-toe with the Turks. They're walking up hills with missiles that they can carry, and they're taking out $20 million tanks. And it's a remarkable document, a statement on asymmetric warfare in 2018, because the Kurds are not exactly playing the insurgency game. They're not hiding. They're just taking better shots than the Turks are. So the Turks are in a bad way in Syria. And this is the type of thing, if Erdogan wants to look around locally for what happens when you don't deliver victory to your people, he might want to call up Slobodan Milosevic and see where he is these days, which is 6 feet under. Because Milosevic tried that trick. He tried going to war to win elections, but every time he went to war, Serbia got smaller and smaller and smaller. So Erdogan should really watch what he's doing. But anyway, that's your close NATO ally update. It is a Dark Secret Place. Next hour, it's Garcetti and Trudeau in the World Series of Love. Also, Kim Yo-jong, the some would say kind of cute younger sister of the murderous dictator Kim Jong-un, as she sweeps the American media. That and more coming up. Hour number 2 of the Dark Secret Place. Brian Suits in here. Until midnight, KFI AM 640. More stimulating talk.
Nobody covers it like KFI.
Aaron Bender, anchor.
Whenever there was more than one fire engine racing down the street, I'm like, okay, Mom, I'm going to go get on my bike and see how quickly I can chase after it. So news was there in my blood. And once I tapped into it, I was like, oh, yeah, this is the one.
KFI.
KOST HD2.
Los Angeles, Orange County.
24-hour news.
More stimulating.
What do you mean? You mean a bigger batter, like bigger than 300 blackout, or what are you talking about? You want to give me a 50 Beowulf? You want to give me a 50 Beowulf upper? Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. I think I've seen that. That would be way cool. Yeah. So are you ammo manufacturing? You're following me on Twitter, right? 'Cause I think I follow you back, right? But I'll follow you back and I'll DM you and we can get together. Because aren't you way down? We've met a bunch of times, right, at the live shows? So we could... Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, I'll DM you on the Twitter. And maybe we could do that tomorrow. If you're in Azusa, then maybe we could hook up in Glendale. I mean, hook up in Glendale or Pasadena before tomorrow night, before Super Hyper Local Sunday. Because I am excited about that. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, okay. Yeah, but I'll DM you because I want to know. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll DM you because yeah, I want to do that. Because I am talking with a solar place, and if you guys, if no one out there knows this, you legally can take your house off of the SoCal Edison grid, but you have to apply to do it, in your town, and it costs a lot of money and all that. Besides, you maybe don't want to do that anyway, because if you have solar and you're doing net metering, you need to be able to put your extra energy back onto the grid. So you need to be able to do that. Even though we're getting screwed in California, it used to be that they had to pay you the market rate, whatever, like at high noon in July when electricity is most expensive, they had to pay you that, right? Well, the utilities lobbied the California Assembly so much to change the law. So now they only have to pay you the cheapest rate. In other states like Oregon, Nevada, and Washington, it's the same thing. When you put power back on, it has to be at the rate at that time. So even though on the one hand they want everyone to go all green, you know, and all that shit, then on the other hand they fuck you over. So, but I'm getting into that, and I might need all of your help because I'm kind of I'm trying to prove to a couple advertisers that it's worth their money to advertise to this audience. And this is you guys, your demographics, your homeowners between 35 and 55, you all generally are driving a 2-year old or younger car. You're a great demo, and for this kind of thing, and especially that kind of lifestyle of, hey, I want the ability to not worry about what happens after the earthquake. You know, I want solar power so that I can have, so I can have a water purifier, I can have, satellite and all that. But you know what my battery is doing again? My battery is dying again. So let me try something. I'm going to shut off the tablet and see if I can charge it for 10 minutes and see if I can get ahead of it draining the battery. You are, Zachary. You are a gigantic anomaly. Where are you? Are you in California? Yeah, well, like I say, I have it plugged in, but because I'm running video, it's taking more battery than this is giving me. So I think if I do that, if I shut it down and charge it up, this is my bad because I did not charge this tablet before I got here. So I'll try to be back. That's correct, Summer. I have. I've lost 15, more like 17 pounds in about 3 weeks because of this one weird trick, which is diet and exercise. So that's weird. I'll tell you more about it when I come back.